Shalom, I'm David Benkof, the Broadway Maven, and we get started. I'm really excited to discuss with you today's topic, which is social issues on Broadway. And as I've spent more and more time as the Broadway Maven, I've come to conclude that musicals don't just tell stories, they tell on us. They reveal what we're afraid to say, what we long to believe, and how we think about ourselves and others. Whether boldly or subtly, Broadway has long served as a platform for addressing the pressing social issues of its time. This isn't just showbiz, it's sociology with a spotlight. We'll trace that history one decade at a time using musical numbers and show overviews to uncover what each era was really singing about. We've already covered many relevant shows, so we won't be focusing on many of the most popular shows or the most obvious examples. So you won't find a South Pacific or Hair on this lecture's list. And I consider that a strength, and I'm excited to present to you 11 shows from 11 decades that illustrate the evolving social agenda of the Great White Way. Great White Way. Here are the shows covered in the lecture and some of the moral tensions they tackle. Note, we will be discussing exactly one show per decade, so we'll have the broadest possible coverage of the issues Broadway has confronted in its century plus of presenting our lives on stage. So we'll look at Showboat, which is about race, miscegenation, spousal abandonment, and addiction. Porgy and Bess, which is about race, disability, addiction, and poverty. Finion's Rainbow, which touches on racism, economic injustice, and magical realism as political satire. The Pajama Game, which is about labor conflicts. Oliver, poverty and child neglect. Sweeney Todd would be class rage, dehumanization, and industrial injustice. La Cage aux Folles is gay family life and social legitimacy. Falsettos is AIDS, masculinity, and Jewish identity. Hairspray is race, body image, and media inclusion. Waitress is domestic abuse and female autonomy. And The Outsiders is class, grief, and adolescent masculinity. We start with Showboat. So when it premiered in 1927, Showboat broke the mold. Before this, musicals were largely escapist, frivolous, episodic, and rarely concerned with anything more serious than romance or mistaken identity. But Showboat, with music by Jerome Kern and lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein II, did something radically different. It took on race, addiction, abandonment, and poverty, embedding them in a narrative that stretched across decades of American life. At its core is the story of Julie, a mixed race performer who is passing as white and married to a white man. When this is discovered, she's forced off the showboat, not because of anything she's done, but because of the laws and prejudices of her time. The implications are devastating and for 1927, shockingly frank. Later, her descent into alcoholism is portrayed with sorrow rather than judgment, offering a rare glimpse of female suffering treated seriously on stage. Another central figure is Joe, a black dock worker who doesn't control the plot but comments on it from the margins. His song, Old Man River, is more than just a show tune. It's a spiritual, a lament, and a protest rolled into one. In it, Joe describes a world that keeps rolling along while people like him suffer unseen and unvalued. It's a moment of quiet fury and resilience that became the emotional centerpiece of the show. Showboat didn't solve the problems it portrayed, but it forced Broadway audiences to look at them. And in Joe's voice, they heard something Broadway had rarely given them before, the weight of injustice and the dignity of endurance. Next is Porgy and Bess, which premiered in 1935. Composed by George Gershwin with a libretto by DuBose Hayward and lyrics by Ira Gershwin and Hayward, Porgy and Bess was billed as a folk opera and broke new ground by presenting a fully black cast in a serious operatic setting. Set in Catfish Row, a fictional black tenement in Charleston, South Carolina, the show follows the disabled beggar Porgy as he attempts to build a life with Bess, a woman entangled with addiction, trauma, and two dangerous men. The piece is soaked in atmosphere, culture, and contradiction. It includes elements of authentic Gullah and Southern Black life, yet it was written by white creators, and that tension still hovers around the show. It seeks to center Black voices, but also presents poverty, violence, and addiction through a lens that can feel exploitative or narrow, depending on the production. Still, Porgy and Bess is landmark in how it addresses multiple overlapping social challenges, physical disability, systemic poverty, drug addiction, domestic abuse, and the limited agency afforded to Black women. The character of Bess in particular is torn between survival and self-destruction, showing how cycles of abuse and dependency are hard to escape without community or security. Despite critiques, the score remains one of the most sophisticated ever written for Broadway. Songs like Summertime, My Man's Gone Now, and I Loves You, Porgy carry emotional heft and cultural resonance. Porgy and Bess challenges us to consider whose suffering we romanticize and what it means to portray marginalized lives with both beauty and pain. The most revealing musical moment in this show comes when Bess sings I Love You, Porgy. It's not just a declaration of love, it's a moment of fragile hope from a woman caught between survival and self destruction. Her plea is raw, honest, and deeply human, capturing the emotional toll of addiction, abuse, and the longing for safety. We now turn to Finion's Rainbow, which opened in 1947. This is one of those fun shows that we don't always talk about. It's an oddball by Broadway standards, part fantasy, part folktale, part political satire. But it's also one of the earliest musicals to take direct aim at racism and economic inequality in the American South. The show was written by lyricist E. Y. Gip Harburg, best known for The Wizard of Oz, with music by Burton Lane, and it arrived at a moment where few Broadway shows were willing to mix serious social commentary with entertainment. The plot follows Finian McGonergan, an Irish immigrant who comes to the fictional state of Mississippi with a stolen pot of gold. Um, he believes that if he plants it in American soil, it will grow because anything can grow in America. That idea, equal parts naivete and optimism, drives much of the story's tone. Meanwhile, a local bigoted senator is trying to force black sharecroppers off their land until a bit of magical interference causes him to turn black himself, experiencing the very discrimination he's been enforcing. That twist, depending on the staging, can play as biting satire or uncomfortable caricature. But the intent is clear to call out hypocrisy, mock racial prejudice, and expose how arbitrary and unjust power structures can be. It's bold for its time and still striking for today. Amid the magical elements and romantic subplots, Finion's Rainbow keeps circling back to one essential question. What does it really mean to believe in America? That question drives both its comedy and its critique. One of the show's cleverest moments comes in when the idle poor become the idle rich. It's a fast-paced, satirical number that lays bare the double standard at the heart of class in America. When poor people are idle, we call them lazy. When rich people are idle, we call them privileged. This song doesn't particularly moralize, it mocks. And it does so with wordplay, wit, and a melody that keeps the commentary moving. Our next show is The Pajama Game, which opened in 1954. At first glance, it might seem too lightweight for a lecture on Broadway and social issues. With Bob Fosse choreography, upbeat songs, and plenty of romantic banter, The Pajama Game looks like pure entertainment. But beneath its cheerful exterior is a smart, unpretentious show about organized labor, workplace power, and the dignity of blue collar work. Set in the sleep tight pajama factory in Iowa, the show revolves around a dispute between the workers and management. The union is fighting for a raise of 7.5 cents an hour, a demand that may sound modest, but carries real stakes for the characters. Meanwhile, the factory's new superintendent, Sid, falls for Babe, who works on the factory's floor and is deeply involved in the union effort. This romantic tension between management and labor mirrors the central conflict of the show, and Babe's role at the heart of the union effort adds a quietly radical note. A working class woman holding her ground in both romance and negotiation. Unlike heavier political musicals, The Pajama Game doesn't moralize or lecture. It just lets its characters speak and sing as real working people. It portrays unions not as heroic or corrupt, but as part of daily life. The show assumes that fairness at work is a natural thing to want, and that workers organizing to demand it is just part of the American story. Musically, it uses humor, harmony, and character driven charm to make its point. The songs don't preach, but they're purposeful. At a time when union membership was high and labor had political clout, this show reflected that world on stage with clarity and confidence. The clearest statement of its message comes in 7.5 cents. In it, Babe and her coworkers calculate how much that raise would mean over time, not just to their wallets, but to their lives. The number is playful, but it underscores a serious truth. When you live paycheck to paycheck, small gains aren't symbolic, they're transformational. When Oliver appeared on Broadway in 1963, it brought Victorian poverty to the mid century stage with songs and sentiment, but also with a quietly devastating critique of how society treats its most vulnerable. Lionel Bart's musical, adapted from Dickens's Oliver Twist, doesn't just tell the story of one orphan, it reveals a world where child neglect is not a crisis, but a routine part of daily life. Oliver isn't abused by a single villain, he's passed from one indifferent adult to another, each more focused on convenience than care. The workhouse feeds him gruel and scolds him for wanting more. Mr. Bumble, the beetle, sees him as a burden to be sold. That's where the show's most disturbing moment comes in, Boy for Sale. In it, Bumble parades Oliver through the streets trying to find a buyer. There's no anger, no menace, it's just cold formality. The music is slow, almost tender, which only sharpens the horror. This is not a song of villainy, it's a song of normalized cruelty. Oliver doesn't scream its social message, instead, it quietly reveals how suffering becomes invisible when it's systemic. Even characters like The Undertaker or Fagin, who show occasional warmth, still see Oliver as a tool, useful, expendable, easily replaced. The show resists turning its story into a fairy tale. Yes, there are big musical numbers and moments of hope, But its world is one where children are often alone and kindness is unreliable. Boy for Sale is the clearest window into that world. It doesn't end up moralizing, it just shows us what happens when a child becomes a transaction. In that quiet, measured melody, the show reminds us that cruelty isn't always loud, it's often disguised as an order, policy, or tradition. Next is Sweeney Todd, which opened on Broadway in 1979. Stephen Sondheim's Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street, is often remembered for its blood and bravado, but beneath the grisly surface lies a potent indictment of class inequality, industrial dehumanization, and the rage that festers when justice is out of reach. Set in Victorian London, but unmistakably reflective of late 20th century anxieties, the show channels social fury through one man's descent into vengeance and implicates us in the process. Sweeney isn't just angry, he's hollowed out by a system that stole his wife, daughter, and livelihood. When he returns after years of wrongful imprisonment, London greets him, not with opportunity, but with rot, polluted air, exploitative employers, and a populace numb to cruelty. Mrs. Lovett's meat pies, stuffed with the remains of Sweeney's victims, offer a grotesque metaphor for an economy that literally feeds on human lives. No one in this world is innocent, but most are trapped, trying to survive in a city that values profits over people. The show never pretends that Sweeney is heroic, but it asks us to understand how rage becomes a rational response to systemic injustice. He's not just mad, he's what happens when institutions fail utterly. And what makes the show so disturbing is not the violence itself, but how easily it slips into entertainment. The audience laughs, gasps, applauds until it's clear the machinery of revenge spares no one, not even the innocent. That machinery is captured chillingly in A Little Priest. In it, Sweeney and Lovett fantasize about turning various professionals into meat pies, joking that each will taste like their station in life. It's witty, horrifying, and revealing. The social hierarchy has become so absurd. It's literal food for thought. By the early 1980s, Broadway had flirted with queer subtext, camp, and coded characters, but La Cage aux Folles brought something radically different. A proud, loving gay couple at the center of the story, not the sidelines. With music and lyrics by Jerry Herman and a book by Harvey Fierstein, um, the show offered mainstream audiences an unapologetic portrayal of gay family life, dignity, and legitimacy at a time when that visibility was still far from assured. At its heart is the relationship between Georges, who runs a Saint Tropez drag nightclub, and Albin, his longtime partner and the star performer Zaza. When Georges' son announces he's marrying the daughter of a conservative politician, the family is thrust into a whirlwind of secrecy, shame, and performative respectability. The moral tension is clear whose love gets to be seen as normal and what exactly is a family. Ah. Um, the show handles these questions with warmth, wit, and showbiz sparkle, but never evades their seriousness. Alban isn't just comic relief in feathers, he's a fully realized character, defiant in the face of rejection, vulnerable in moments of doubt, and utterly devoted to his makeshift family. In a musical theater landscape still hesitant to depict queer characters as emotionally complete, La Cage aux Folles was a quiet revolution. That revolution is captured most powerfully in I Am What I Am. Sung at the end of the first act, it's not just a plea for tolerance, it's a demand for recognition. Alban belts out his identity, his pain, and his pride with equal force, refusing to shrink or assimilate for the comfort of others. The song became an anthem far beyond the theater, resonating deeply with queer audiences and anyone who has ever been told to be less visible, less themselves. Next is Falsettos, which opened on Broadway in 1992. William Finn's Falsettos isn't just about one social issue, it's a layered portrait of masculinity, identity, family, and illness in a moment when all of those were being redefined. The musical, which combines March of the Falsettos, 1981, and Falsetto Land, 1990, captures the AIDS crisis as it was happening, not in hindsight. That immediacy makes it one of Broadway's most intimate and emotionally devastating examinations of how love, tradition, and tragedy coexist. At its center is Marvin, a man who's left his wife for another man, but still wants to maintain a picture perfect nuclear family. That tension between gay liberation and inherited expectations of masculinity drives much of the show's early conflict. His wife, Trina, his lover, Whizzer, his son, Jason, and his psychiatrist, Mendel, form a web of strained affections, unmet needs, and shifting loyalties. The show's humor and wordplay are sharp, but they never deflect from the emotional stakes. When AIDS enters the narrative in the second act, Falsettos doesn't become a medical drama. It becomes a spiritual one. This show explores how families, traditional or not, respond when mortality arrives without mercy or explanation. It's not a political screed or a public health lecture. It's a human cry. What does it mean to love someone who is dying? And how do we stay whole while everything is breaking? That cry is heard most clearly in What Would I Do? A haunting duet sung by Marvin and Whizzer as the illness takes its final toll. That's no melodrama, just love, regret, and longing expressed in the simplest terms. The song doesn't preach, it mourns, and in doing so, it captures the unspeakable cost of a plague um, that Broadway and its audiences were living through in real time. Next is Hairspray, which opened on Broadway in 2002. At a glance, Hairspray is all bounce and buoyancy, big hair, bright colors, and infectious energy. But beneath the retro gloss lies a firm, clear-eyed challenge to racism, fat phobia, and media gatekeeping. With music by Mark Shaman, lyrics by Shaman and Scott Whitman, and a book by Mark O'Donnell and Thomas Meehan, the show transforms a John Waters cult film into one of Broadway's most cheerful acts of resistance. Set in 1962 Baltimore, the story follows Tracy Turnblad, a plus-sized teenager who dreams of dancing on the Corny Collins show. But what starts as a personal quest for acceptance quickly becomes a broader fight for integration. Tracy uses her unexpected fame to push for racial equity in live television, challenging both the show's producers and the society that keeps black dancers segregated to Negro Day. What makes Hairspray so effective is its refusal to separate fun from meaning. The show insists that joy itself can be political. Tracy's optimism is radical because it refuses to see exclusion as permanent. Murdermouth Maybell's anthemic I Know Where I've Been delivers one of the show's raw, serious moments, honoring the weight of civil rights struggles. But Hairspray is more interested in forward motion than solemn reflection. It uses rhythm, humor, and ensemble momentum to insist that change is not only possible, it's overdue. The ethos explodes in the finale. You can't stop the beat. It's part musical theater number, part mission statement. As characters of different races, sizes, and backgrounds unite in song, the show's core message is undeniable. Progress might stutter, but stall or be delayed, but it won't be stopped. And not by pressure, not by fear, and not by tradition. Next is Waitress, which opened on Broadway in 2016. In a Broadway season filled with historical epics and flashy revivals, Waitress offered something quieter and in many ways more radical. With music and lyrics by Sarah Bareilles and a book by Jesse Nelson, the show tells the story of Jenna, a small town waitress and expert pie maker navigating an unwanted pregnancy, an abusive marriage, and a deep longing for a life she's never had. But while Waitress deals with serious issues, domestic violence, financial dependence, and emotional isolation, it never loses sight of joy, humor, and friendship. That last piece is crucial. Waitress doesn't just tell the story of one woman's struggle, it shows how women hold each other up. Jenna's co-workers, Becky and Dawn, aren't just sidekicks, they're lifelines. Together, the three women joke, vent, dance, and scheme their way through long shifts and difficult lives. Their bond is the beating heart of the show, and nowhere is that clearer than in A Soft Place to Land. In this trio, sung quietly at the start of the second act, Jenna, Becky, and Dawn sing about their dreams, tiny, tender hopes for safety, love, and rest. The song is gentle, but the stakes are high. It's about what it means to want something better, even when you don't yet believe you deserve it. In a world that often isolates women in crisis, this number insists that solidarity is more than comfort, it's survival. Waitress doesn't offer a fairy tale ending, but it offers something more honest. A world where change is possible and where the presence of kind, flawed, funny women can make all the difference. Finally, we turn to The Outsiders, which opened on Broadway in 2024. Based on S.E. Hinton's groundbreaking 1967 novel and the 1983 film adaptation, The Outsiders arrives on Broadway as both a period piece and a timely reflection on class, masculinity, and grief. With a score by Jamestown Revival and Justin Levine and a book by Adam Rapp with Levine, the show captures the raw emotion of adolescence in a world that offers few tools for self-understanding, let alone survival. Set in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 1960s, the story centers on Ponyboy Curtis and his fellow greasers, teenage boy growing up poor, fatherless, and consistently on the defensive. Their lives are defined by territory, toughness, and tension, with the wealthier socias whose power comes from privilege as much as the violence. But The Outsiders doesn't simply portray class struggle, it portrays the emotional cost of trying to be a man in a world where vulnerability is dangerous and grief has no outlet. At its core, the musical is about boys who are expected to act like men without being allowed to feel like humans. Reads poetry, Johnny flinches at cruelty, and Dolly burns with a kind of wounded pride. They're kids trying to survive in bodies built for softness but trained for war. Nowhere is that tension more achingly expressed than in Stay Gold, a song built around Johnny's dying wish to Ponyboy. The line comes from Robert Frost's Nothing Gold Can Stay, and in the musical it becomes a mantra, an aching call to preserve goodness in a brutal world. It's not just about innocence, it's about choosing not to harden, even when everything pushes you to. The Outsiders ends not with triumph, but with a question. Can tenderness survive when everything around you says it's weakness? Stay Gold suggests that it can, but only if we name it, fight for it, and remember who taught it to us. Broadway has never been afraid to put its heart on stage, and its conscience too. These 11 shows, spanning nearly a century, show how the musical has evolved into one of our most honest cultural barometers. And while the styles may change, from operatic lament to punk-infused anthem to folk-inflected memory, the question remains the same. What kind of world are we building, and who gets to sing in